Social justice means applying the law equally to all people, but in practice, that doesn't always happen. I'm John Gonzalez. I'm here at my law partner, Jack DeRora. We practice law, we seek social justice. On this show, we reveal the conflict between the two.
You know, for a while, it was just us in the office over a cup of coffee talking about the news of the day. With social justice issues dominating our culture, our focus became, how do we as lawyers make a difference?
And now it's not just us. Today we have Franklin County Commissioner Kevin Boyce. He's going to discuss expanding opportunities for underserved communities. Commissioner Boyce is focused in his public life on ways to spend public money wisely, expand opportunities for underserved communities, train workers better for getting better paid jobs, and champion the need for access to affordable health care. Welcome, Commissioner Boyce.
Yeah, Jack, John, thanks so much for having me. Excited about the conversation today.
Jack, I was telling you about my trip to Marco Island.
Right.
So it was for a wedding, and the people that have the wedding have some considerable wealth, so they rented a really nice yacht to take all the wedding people around Marco Island and look at the homes. And, well, yeah, I'm kind of a boating person, so I was talking to the first mate, this young lady, just as we were going along, and I said, "How do you like Marco Island?" She goes, "You know, I love Marco Island, but I don't live on Marco Island." She goes, "No way I could afford to live on Marco Island." I said, "What brought you to this job?" She goes, "Well, I was a waitress in a restaurant, and I met the people that own the yacht, and they needed us to be here." And so she's just telling me the story. And she said the difference between working on Marco Island for her and not is she didn't have to pay for the parking. That's how thin her margins were.
Jeez.
As far as affordable. And it brought to mind how much disparity there is between the people that have and then the people that serve them that have not.
Oh, it's gigantic, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's probably that way in Columbus, Ohio, I would think.
Yeah, John. I mean, I was told I could call you Gonzo, so I just
fine.
want to make sure that's you're okay with that. But I think you really hit the nail on the head. So many families, so many people who perhaps work downtown or work in more affluent areas, but can't afford to live in that same area that they work. That's a common theme that we're hearing in Central Ohio, and I'll tell you, that issue is only growing in Central Ohio. We are expecting to grow Franklin County by over 1 million people over the next 20 or so years. And that seems like a long time, but it's really not for 1 million people. It's hard to be prepared to take in the growth needs that occur with that. And embedded in that is affordable housing, workforce housing. You all have been around Central Ohio for a long time, so I'm sure you can remember when downtown Columbus wasn't downtown Columbus that we know today, where there are condos and apartments everywhere. But now we built this community that when I was on city council, led by Mayor Coleman, where we put these, they're really luxury homes in place, apartments and whatnot. And so you have a lot of people who work down at some of the hospitality establishments, the restaurants and bars, who can't afford to live in this community. And so you take a Marco Island, and I just can't imagine the scenario of the difference between what it costs to live there and what you might earn working in that environment.
It was incredible just to be there and see all of the wealth. But, I grew up in Columbus. Mm-hmm. I was at Beechcroft High School. And
Cougars.
The Cougars, yeah. And I know you did. And I bet our upbringings were probably entirely different from just what little I've read about you. But, I grew up middle class, predominantly white until they integrated the school system. And, didn't think there were any restrictions on the opportunities I had. And I know your upbringing was a lot different than that. Can you talk a little bit about how that's kind of framed your mindset as you work in the public sector?
Sure. I mean, first of all, let me tell you, what I've learned in 25 plus years in being in public service is that everyone has a story. And what I don't do is grade others' story to say, well, I had it tougher than this person, or this person has it better. I think every journey is unique. Every journey is for that person. And so mine started off in a very rough nature. I grew up on the east and north side of Columbus. My grandmother lived on the east side. My mom lived on the north side. When we had housing challenges, often I was sent to live with my grandma. But at the age of 7, things really turned when my father was murdered. Now, here's a guy who did 2 tours in Vietnam as a Marine, only to come back to his own community and have his life taken by somebody that looks like him, lives in the same community, and in a domestic kind of environment in a very different kind of time, the 70s. And I say that because when that kind of tragedy happens to a family, the reverberations of that impact last for a lifetime, whether they are economic, whether they are mental health oriented, or even educational, because at that age, you're forming a lot of your thoughts. And I know there are a lot of families, a lot of people who face that same kind of journey. Maybe the tragedy story is different, but the poverty is the same. And when you are already in poverty and tragedy strikes, there is a lot of layers that it takes to get out of that trench of poverty. And so I think when you ask my story, that's a simple way of putting it, where I think that probably was the most catalytic thing that happened to me as a child, that in many ways fueled my direction to come out of it. And so, it's a story that all too many Central Ohioans face, unfortunately.
I'm trying to think about what it's like to be 7 years old and have your father killed. That's pretty stunning in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I remember the day like it was yesterday.
Sure you do.
Jack, and I'll tell you this, I can't remember yesterday practically. I don't remember what I had for dinner. I don't remember what happened yesterday. I remember that day like it was yesterday in full detail. I remember what the weather was like. I remember the knock on the door that we got that morning. I remember my aunt ushering my mom into the kitchen very quickly and then hearing my mom scream and cry. And then I remember her pulling my sister and I onto her lap and explain to us that our father had just been murdered. And, there are no words to describe how that has had an influence on how I've been in service, because I wouldn't say, John, that I was back then so motivated where I thought one day I'm going to run for office and I'm going to change the world. But to be honest with you, I think back to it, and I do believe that there was a moment in time where I said, I want something different in life, and I feel compelled to do something different. And I didn't know what it was then. It wasn't as sophisticated as I think about it today. But back then, imagine the pain being so deep that a 7-year-old is sitting there thinking, I don't want this life. I don't want to grow up in this environment. I don't want, and you don't understand it at 7. You don't truly have a grasp of it, and you're processing it. And then you go back to school, and the teachers are wondering, why aren't you talking? Why aren't you participating in class? Why didn't you read the lesson last night? Why did you get these answers wrong? Why did you, why? And then there's a disconnect that starts to happen in the educational process that begins to start those layers of profound impact that I think impact families.
We invited you here to talk about RISE, and certainly want to talk to you about what happened at the VA, but I want to take a little left-hand turn because you grew up in a low-income area, right? I'm wondering what the guiding light for you was besides this traumatic event, or the guiding person who said, Kevin, there's a way out. There's a way to get better. Who was that? How did it happen?
Thanks for that question, Jack. I mean, I have to be honest. I would have to say there were a lot of people along the way.
Were there?
Who took interest in me. It might have been a teacher, a coach, a neighbor, someone in the community. But I would have to say all along the way, there were people that took my hand and said, let me help. And they were white, they were black, they were male, they were female, they were old, and they were young. And if I named all the people like Mr. Howard, who was the longtime basketball coach at Brookhaven, but before that, he was the gym teacher at Crestview Middle School. And every day, Mr. Howard would pick me up and take me to the gym, or on the weekends. He'd pick me up and take me to the gym and let me shoot around with him. And that started my love for basketball. Or it was James at the Recreation Center, who was a twin, very tall. And I think his last name was, what was James? I don't remember. But James, who I made my first basketball team. But moreover making the team was the idea that every day practice was at X time, that you had to work on dribbling, you had to work on shooting, you had to practice and take it seriously, you had to come prepared, and you had to learn the principles of life. It's sports at the time, but those principles transfer into life. And so if I started to make the list of the people who poured into me, and for whatever they saw, they were trying to help, I don't know that they saw anything magical or special in me other than seeing a kid that had hope and they had hope and need for. And so the list would be too long to count the people who poured into me, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, it sounds like you were lucky in that respect then, to have those people around you.
No question.
Because I'm I don't want to say a firm believer, but I think it's hard to figure out how to be successful if you don't have a guiding light around you.
I think that's absolutely right. And when there is tragedy and chaos around you, it's very difficult to see that light when you're in the darkness. Mm-hmm. And you don't think about it as a 7-year-old, but you think about things like being hungry. Mm. You think about things like not having electricity or gas. You think about things like having, clothes that have holes in them, or shoes that should have been thrown away a long time ago. You think about those things, and you know what that means. And so I think that exposure. Today I think about in a very sophisticated way. Of course, I think about poverty, and I think about what we can do for the little Kevins out there now. And what I know for sure is it can't be by chance that I get the opportunity because I had these 10 people pour into me and pick me out and grab my hand. It shouldn't be by chance. It has to be, we have to do a better job of creating a systemic environment where everybody just has a chance. And that's kind of the whole the underlying conversation around DE&I. It's not about the selection of a black person or a woman or a veteran. It's about that I get an opportunity to compete fair and square for that opportunity. And I think that, to me, is helping to create the bridge out of poverty. To me, that's what it would do.
So much of what you talk about growing up it's the environment where you actually lived, and now you're a Franklin County commissioner, and Franklin County has very affluent areas and in areas of a lot of poverty. How do those two mix in your goal to help this young person in the less affluent communities where there's a lot of poverty? When you take Bexley, for example. Well, actually, let's talk New Albany. Didn't they just have the first murder in 100 years in New Albany? Yeah. The first murder in over 100 years. And, you couldn't say that about the community you grew up in.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think at the heart of what you're talking about, John, is that, you can go around Central Ohio and there's not a place that you don't see orange barrels or cranes in the sky. I mean, we are growing. And so in the natural course of growth, in the organic course of growth, there are going to be differences. There are going to be communities like New Albany that has one of the highest home values in the state of Ohio. And then there are going to be places like Linden who have one of the lowest. And that is a fact. Our job as elected officials, as the cones are taken over and the cranes are in the skies, our job is to ensure that embedded in that are opportunities for everyone. That, I mean, you take the airport that's being built, a new airport. That's, again, sign of our growth, and we're going to spend $2 billion to create this new terminal for the airport. But who are the people who get those jobs? Who are the people that can make it'll take years to build that out. Who are the people who get a opportunity to provide for their families, to save for college for their kids, to maybe start a small business? I mean, that to me is the real conversation that we've got to have, so that as our community grows, that it's not so big of a difference to go from one community to the next. That, there are going to be some natural and organic differences. That's just the way it is. But our job is to kind of minimize that, so that if you live in Linden, you can get a good education. You can access a public library. You can have a good job. If you want to live downtown and you work at the Walrus, or you work at, one of the restaurants downtown, that, you can walk to work. You can live, in a place where you can afford to walk to work. And so I think those are the conversations that we need to be serious and deliberate about as we grow, as the orange barrels and the cranes line up our skies.
Probably have a little more influence over, what's happening, say, with the Intel plant. I mean, how much money is the state sinking into making sure that's a success? And the idea that people from underserved communities can get jobs there, that's going to help those communities, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to...
Well, assuming those communities are able to, assuming the workers are drawn from those communities is what I'm inartfully trying to say.
Right, which is part DEI, but there's got to be other programs somebody was telling me that just the concrete alone, just the workers needed to lay the concrete out at that plant, are going to employ hundreds and hundreds of people. And so, those jobs are now not too bad paying jobs.
Oh, they're probably good.
Yeah, and so you start putting that money into people's pockets in areas of Franklin County that don't have a lot of money. That's just going to raise the community.
Yeah.
Am I wrong on the economics?
No, you're absolutely right. And it's not just Intel, but it's Anderl, it's the airport. I go on and on about major projects that can fuel our community in a way that allows families to have a chance at real success. And I think, what you're saying is absolutely right, that I mean, that's the catalyst. It is the, when Detroit was in its heyday, part of what fueled not just the city of Detroit, but the region, is the auto manufacturers, the suppliers and the part makers and the assembly lines and so forth and so on. And I think it's really, and it created an entire middle and upper class in the region that fueled it for decades. Where we have to stay ahead of the game is creating the infrastructure that allows someone to live in New Albany and work in downtown Columbus or wherever, and that means you can either jump in your car or jump on public transit, take an Uber, whatever it is to get there, and it's not a dramatic shift in your life to be able to commute that way.
How are you helping these communities then? I mean, what do the commissioners do? It seems to me you might have had more influence at the State House when you were there than you have now, but...
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I was in the minority.
Oh, that's right.
So,
yes.
I would say I had really a lot of influence. But well, here's I'll tell you this, that it's cool as a county commissioner. When I became a county commissioner, put it this way, people would say, I was running, they'd say, well, what does a county commissioner do? And so I'd spend time doing these posts and say, okay, what does a county commissioner do? Let me show you. Did you know the county commissioners run the court system? Did you know we run the jail system? Did you know we run the welfare system? We have public health and so forth and so on. And so, you try to educate people about it. But what we did in 2017 was we had a retreat and we peeled back the layers to say, what's at the core of what we do? And what we decided that we would own, and we decided that we would really dig into, particularly because of the growth question, was poverty. That we would attack it like we attack potholes on the streets, things that you notice and you see and you feel. we would attack it like we want to attack housing and employment. And so we created RISE. What we did wasn't back up. We convened a group of thought leaders in poverty. So social service providers and clinicians, and we said, let's talk about, how we can address poverty. We hired these consultants and they came out and we required that each commissioner, Commissioner Marilyn Brown, Commissioner John O'Grady, and myself, we had to be present at every meeting. There was no send a staff person and let us know how it goes. That we were rolling up our sleeves, digging in. And this is a long story short. We got to the meeting after convening for a whole year. We met, I'm going to say biweekly, for a whole year. And they presented us with this beautiful plan. Here's the plan to all the things you need to know about getting out of poverty. You need more affordable housing. You need better paying jobs. You need infrastructure. And I'm thinking, okay, tell me something we didn't know.
Right.
And so I raised my hand, Jack. I raised my hand and I said, well, what's the big idea? Like, what are we going to do differently tomorrow that we were doing today? We know all of this, and it's great that it's in a nice book that we can look at and show everyone. But where's the big idea? And so we created the RISE Institute to be an institute of big ideas to address poverty. And so COVID hit, and there was George Floyd's death, and everything kind of shook our country and slowed us down. But ultimately, we were able to stand up the RISE Institute, and that's their sole purpose, is to take ideas, big ideas, and test them, replicate them, and bring them to scale when they work so that we can address poverty.
Give me a couple. I didn't know about the RISE Institute until not that long ago, so I think I've proven to you now that twice I'm behind in the news cycle, so forgive me. But give us a couple concrete examples of what's come out of the RISE Institute.
Well, one of the things that I really like to talk about is a organization we've partnered with called Motherful. And Motherful is all about single moms and giving them, and I think of, I was raised by a single mom, obviously, and I think about the need that my mom, for example, struggled. She had, a couple of jobs, a high school education, and she worked at a bar and at a warehouse when I was growing up. And later, she got a job at the post office, but I was in high school by then. And when she got that job at the post office, you would have thought we hit the lottery. Seriously. I felt like, insurance? What is that? Health? Dentist? And so I think I got glasses for the first time then, and I'm blind, like legally, and so I can't be out on the streets without contacts, So the point is, we created this program to think about big ideas. Motherful is a program that essentially provides single moms that have trajectory for a better finish than they started, and provides them with supplemental income for a period of time to help them get to that next rung, that next layer of life. And it might be money to obtain a college degree or attain some specific training, like in technology, so she can get one of those Intel jobs. Or it might even be emergency funds. The transmission on the car goes out. Now I can't get to daycare, and I can't get to soccer breaks, and I can't get to work. And so we've created a fund that allows for those single moms to access and tap into that and not be pulled down into the trenches because of some, mechanical tragedy. So Motherful is one of my favorites. Another program that we've been doing is convening a conference annually to hear from our clinicians and social workers and folks' stories and products and things and services that have moved the needle somewhat. And so I always find that to be interesting because there's always something that deserves replication. One of the things my colleague, Commissioner Erica Crawley, has been advocating that's come somewhat from these conversations is early childhood education, and really fueling and funding a better child care system that will allow those mothers that we just talked about to have a support and have and educate those kids. So those are two that kind of jump out at me.
Those are two good ones.
The supplemental income for single mothers, that's an incredible investment, right? I mean, that pays immediate dividends into the community because it's not as if your mom, if she was receiving extra money, or these mothers are putting it into, stocks and bonds and trying to build wealth. They're spending it in the community immediately. You just think there would be more government entities that are committed to that type of help for people other than, say, cutting taxes, for the Marco Island folks.
But there are some people who would say, who listen to this, and they'll say, well, why should that person get a supplemental income? I work hard. I should get something too. I have needs. And so there are going to be those people. And here's what I say. Looking at an organization like Motherful, let me give you an example of a real-life case, and I won't say the name, but a real-life case where a young lady worked at Franklin County, and she had 3 kids. She had 2 kids at the time.
Worked for an agency, you mean?
She worked for an agency, yes, sir. She worked for an agency at Franklin County, had 2 kids, and got a promotion. The promotion would impact her income to the point where her child care, she'd lose her child care subsidy for the 2 kids she's got. Single mom, 2 kids, got a job and works hard, does a good job by all standards, gets promoted, but now it takes her off of the supplemental benefit that helps her with child care. And you know how expensive child care is.
Sure.
My kids are adults now, so I don't quite know the numbers, but I know it's expensive.
Right.
I know there's a serious amount. And when you got 2 and 1 income, it can be a serious pull on your finances. So she gets promoted, and she loses the benefit. She says, I can't take the promotion because the benefit of the child care is more valuable to me. I can't afford it. The promotion isn't enough to pick up the child care. So I'm going to have to deny the promotion so that I can keep the child care. And that is not productive.
Right.
We want that mother, her trajectory was solid, and we could get her on a pathway of self-sustainability. But here's this whole, you got to turn down a promotion, but here's the kicker to the whole thing. So she was pregnant with her 3rd child, okay? And so what they said to her was, this is our system, said, you're going to lose your benefits for the child care. If you take the promotion, you're going to lose the benefits. But after you have the 3rd kid, you'll qualify again. So just come back after that. And so now she's lost the subsidy for the time while she's pregnant. Now you're talking about, all the things that go into nurturing the child, why it's in the womb and trying to, be healthy. You're talking about all kinds of struggle of resources that bring a harder strain on the system later by not providing that mother with the resources she needs, all because she got a promotion and the numbers just ticked her over here, and so she either had to not take it. Which I said, no, you got to take that. And then she had the 3rd kid, and then she qualified again.
What a system. Yeah. Who was the gentleman that the millionaire for, remember he came on and he was talking about the social services help millionaires, because you just got to think of it as it makes us money as we're drawing everybody up and into the economy. If they're doing good, those of us at the top are doing good. Well, do you remember?
I forgot. That was a year ago. He had the big picture on poverty, and he was a man of great means, but he understood that you've got to raise the bottom tier, which...
Yeah, and he had a group that was called Millionaires for...
Oh gosh.
You would have loved him, Commissioner Boyce. You would have loved him, because his idea was all of these social services bring people up so that then they can go spend money in my stores, right? And which is exactly what it does, because he said they don't put this money into people that need the social services aren't putting the money in the savings accounts for the most part. They're putting it back into the economy, and that helps all of us. Mm-hmm. And it was really refreshing to think of somebody with that kind of means thinking along those lines.
To have the big picture.
We're bad because we can't remember.
Yeah, that's because we're old.
Okay.
We need social services. Hey, let's go back to DEI for a second. Sure. DEI has been getting clubbed over the head for the last year and a half, 2 years, and now is just taking it in the face. Which Gonzo and I ascribe to as people, they either don't understand it, don't want to understand it, don't want to have to deal with it. You're on the other side of that. How do you handle this? Is there a message to be made? What do you make of this?
Well, I want to say it's a tough conversation because I think it is somewhat divisive right now. You know, whenever you start to put things like color, gender, race onto considerations, that in itself is a proposition value that you lose some steam. My argument about D&I is it's not about any of those things. It's really about taking them away and allowing us all to be judged, critiqued on the contents of our character, our qualifications and experiences, and the job that we could do. And so I think, you know, we're in for a haul because both sides are, I think, diminishing the conversation somewhat. And I'll give you an example. I'll be critical of my own party.
Okay.
You know, I think President Biden had a good presidency. I think he did some things that, you know, some things I agree with, some things I don't. But one of the things he did that really bothered me was when he was choosing his vice presidential candidate, he made this announcement that I'm going to pick a black woman at some point. And I thought, man, you just did a disservice to the potential of that black woman because it wasn't about the selection of a black woman. It was about picking the best candidate. And if she happened to be a black woman, great. And if that's your, you know, preconceived notion based on the candidates on the table, that's fine. But you should go through the process and allow it to play out and try to keep an open mind about what's best for this country. I think his intentions were sincere, and I don't question that. But I think that's often the conversation we get lost in is trying our best to for the call of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we overlook that the capacity of selection is not based on that, but based on the experiences. And I'll give you one example for myself. When I was on city council, Jack, we chose, as we had a vacancy, and I can't remember what created the vacancy, but we selected a candidate by the name of Mary Jo Hudson.
Sure.
Mary Jo Hudson was a very competent lawyer, very involved in the community, very well-known person, a real up-and-comer. And she happened to be outwardly gay. We selected her, and everybody made the big deal about choosing a gay council person for the first time in history, openly gay council. And I kept saying, what are you talking about? She was just the best candidate. You know, she was a great candidate, and we chose her. And she's gay. Oh, okay. That's what for next. What else can we talk about here? And I think that's what DEI looks to accomplish, is that we remove those barriers with the thought and insight, quite frankly, that we've got growth to do as a country. You know, you asked me earlier about my speech at the Columbus VA, and I know you want to get to that.
Oh, we do.
Should I save it for that part,
No,
or should I
want to
use this? Okay, I'll let you do your show, and then I'll come back with the right response. Okay.
Well, I do want to get to that,
Okay.
but I think what I'm hearing you say is, in your view, DEI is just a matter of expanding the boundary of the search, and the opponents see it as looking for specific identities from which to make the selection.
And that's that's not the right way to do that.
Well,
you know?
I don't think it is, and I don't think that's what it was intended, but that's certainly become the sound bite.
And that's what divides us, quite honestly, because it takes others and says, well, if you don't fit this demographic, then I'm going to place this person over you, and even has an element of presumption that person isn't truly qualified, that they're only being put there because of this issue. And I think that you have to have the basic level of qualifications first, and then we go from there about selection and contracts and all the other things that go with it. And I just think the conversation, in many ways, the conversation needs to be restarted so that we can take out this sort of bad karma about, it's, if you're black or if you're gay or if you're a female, if you're a veteran or whatever, those are the criteria to which you might be able to access some job or some whatever. And so I just, maybe some of this conversation is healthy. Here's what I will tell you. It's healthy that we're having the conversation. And I just think that, I think we've got a ways to go on it. I don't think it'll be less painful for the next few years. It'll be more painful. But I'm hoping, that's one of the beauties about a representative democracy, is that we're ever evolving into what we want to be. And that's what our founding fathers set out to do by choosing this form of government.
I have to take the DEI conversation a little off kilter, because you think about the United States Supreme Court, or you think about the presidency. There's a lot of qualified people for the United States Supreme Court, a lot of them, women, men, black, white, Asian. So I'm okay with thinking, look, there hasn't been a black woman on the Supreme Court. There are 2,000 qualified people that could sit on that court, right? Why not put a black woman on it, like you said, if she's qualified? And it got kind of turned on its head. I was all for a woman president. Yeah. Not because, I didn't think she was qualified or we should put somebody up there, but we've got a qualified woman. Why wouldn't we want a woman to be president finally?
But you said the key word. You said we have a qualified person, a qualified person, and I feel like how DE&I has been turned against us is it presumes that they are not qualified.
Right.
And that's the part that
that's the political aspect of it. But when you think about, let's say, a police force, local police force, that's been predominantly white male, right? Then you know that they're trying to get qualified minorities to apply. And when they do, they would like to hire them because it just helps to have somebody different. Yeah. You're not in this bubble of people that look like yourself. And so, I think some of the argument against DEI, I would say, doesn't bother me as long as they're qualified, right?
Yeah, I love that you said that, and I like the way you laid it out. The question is, have we matured enough as a nation to simply be as evolved as you're laying that out? And I think we haven't. I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
And so you have to focus on merit, because when you say, when the president says or someone says, we're going back to merit-based selections, that presumes that the people you were just identifying weren't qualified merit-wise. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said they were.
We discussed this, and part of what I think happened with DEI is political, because it became the boogeyman. It doesn't matter if it's DEI or not. I don't like that, so I'm going to call it DEI so it'll go away. It reminds me, and some of the writers have been putting this together, when used to say, oh, you're just being a communist back in the day, because that was so bad to be labeled a communist. And the people weren't doing anything that
words.
And they weren't doing anything remotely similar to communism. But I think DEI has kind of been captured now as the term, a derogatory term that means just about anything these politicians want. And it is such a good idea that hopefully won't go away.
Gonzo, the thing that I think scares me is how the corporations have so quickly reacted to the president's executive order. And it tells me that the appetite for it was never authentic in the first place. And I worry more about that mentality, because everybody's so quick to pull the trigger. Oh, the president said it, and they're going after DI. And so they're quick. Then you see the companies one after another, killing their DEI, and it really comes down to the political theatrics that you just identified, where there've been a certain group been able to bring negativity to the entire phrase and words, and so therefore it's attacked under really a false premise that doesn't even hold water.
Your idea, Gonzo, about DEI being the boogeyman reminds me of when there was talk about Medicare for all. Oh, that's bad because it's socialism. Now, it wasn't socialism, but the mere fact that it acquired that label killed it.
Well,
right.
we were going to talk about the VA, and I saw this person, Judson Jeffries, wrote an article in support of your position. And
I didn't see that. You had to send me that.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
You know who he is, though. He's a professor at OSU.
Right.
But he's Hakeem Jeffries' brother.
Oh,
No
I didn't
way.
know
The
that.
minority leader in the
Is he
House of
really?
Representatives. His brother's a professor at OSU. So that's who that is.
Hey, Gonzo, that's the third thing I didn't know today.
Hey, I'm here to educate,
Yeah,
okay?
right. What caught my idea is that the DEI the military has been one of the biggest beneficiaries of DEI hiring. The recruitment efforts to get different people and different qualified people and that's the point he was making, that this has got to be the worst place to not talk about it. But they wouldn't let you, I guess.
At the VA.
At the VA.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah.
Guy.
Okay. Let me first say, I think that's who that is. I know there's a professor Jeffries. I just can't remember his first name. That I could be wrong. That may not be him.
Okay.
But Hakeem Jeffries' brother is a professor at OSU. I'm not quite 100% sure. But so I was invited out to be the keynote speaker for MLK Day, and love that. I get those invitations all the time. And it's one of those things where I get to speak about my own journey, my own story, and the heart of why we celebrate a great man who sacrificed his life so that we could be a better country. And so I took the offer. And again, I have hundreds of offers to speak, so it's not like I'm looking for them. My schedule goes out right now to June, already. So I take it. The day comes, back up. President Carter passed, so they moved the date because they were doing a memorial for him. So they moved the date, and so it got pushed out. So the day comes, and about 2 hours before, I'm actually packing up to go head to the VA. We get a call. It's the VA. They say, "Hey, looking forward to hearing Commissioner Boyce, but given the president's executive order that came down, I believe the day before or maybe the 2 days before, he has to refrain from any references of diversity, equity, inclusion, and he cannot make use those words in his speech about Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy and impact." And by the way, they asked me to talk about my own journey as well as how it links to Martin Luther King Jr. So I'm like, well, I feel like those words are synonymous with Martin Luther King Jr., his legacy. And so I said to them, okay, well, good luck finding a speaker in the next 2 hours because I won't be there. If you're telling me, and what I said was, if you are choosing to infringe on my First Amendment rights, I want to tell you, good luck. You better get off the phone now because you've got a really short amount of time. The clock is ticking for you to replace the keynote speaker. And so they call back. I told myself, get off the phone. We got to get to work. I'm moving on. For the folks who made that choice, we don't share the same value set. We're not on the same page. You're not going to ask me to be a keynote speaker and then tell me what I can and cannot say, especially about my own journey and story. Sure. And so they called back and they said, if you don't come, we're going to tell people you just didn't show up. I said, well, you can tell people what you want, but I got receipts of all of the communication from you guys of what you wanted me to talk out before the executive order and what you said. So if you want to go down this route, we can. And, I said, I'm just telling you, we don't share the same value set. And I'm sorry for all of those veterans, including my father, who would be heartbroken and disappointed. And I said, so, I'm sorry for that. I was going to tell you, there were people who reached out to us from the VA who was giving us sort of the play-by-play internal stuff. You know,
yeah.
basically saying, "Oh my gosh, we were so disgusted by what we knew they were going to say to you about D&I." And so the bottom line for me was I politely backed out, and I've probably heard from no less than 1,000 people in this community thanking me for that position, thanking me for issuing the statement saying that I would not be backed out of the speech. And I feel bad because I heard from several of the employees at the VA who said they were really looking forward to my presentation. And so it was disappointing. But again, I think this is a conversation we have to have. These are tough conversations, but it's time to have them.
I'm curious, how much of your speech was going to be DEI related? I mean, talking about all of that, it's intrinsic in what you're saying anyway, but did you have a speech prepared that focused on DEI at the time?
Well, I don't know that it focused on DEI, but I do think it's synonymous with my journey.
Right.
That, when I became the first African-American in the history of Franklin County to be elected commissioner, and one of only 3 in the state of Ohio to be elected commissioner at the time, it speaks to what you described so perfectly earlier, Gonzo, which is, the idea that this is a diverse state and having diverse perspectives and ideas is a value added to all of us. And so I can't talk about my story and my journey where I grew up in poverty and tragedy and you asked me earlier, Jack, how did you get there? And it were people all along the way that one way or another, grabbed my hand and said, come with me, let me show you how. But there were moments in time that where the system accommodated that opportunity for me, whether it was athletics, education, you name it. And so to me, the D&I story is part of my story. Hey, let me say this too, D&I is one component, but I got to earn my way after that. You got to, you could say and so my message would have been, it's also about earning your way. I don't know if you saw my bio where I founded a bank, a Delphi bank. And, while I don't consider the bank to be a DE&I, it very exclusively focuses, not just exclusive, that's the wrong choice of words. It focuses on mission-based banking to ensure that people that come from that same neighborhood and community that I did have a chance to buy a home, have a chance to save for college, have a chance to start a business, or invest in securities or things that, gain the money. So, I really feel like it would have been hard to tell my story and not acknowledge and pay homage to the idea that I'm where I am because people gave me a chance they didn't see. I was the state treasurer of Ohio at 36, 37, and Governor Strickland, who saw fit to appoint me, I'm sure he had to be thinking, look, I'd like to see a black man as the state treasurer, and I'd like to see us do better as a state. Now, he never said that to me. That was never part of our conversation, but I knew I had that responsibility. I knew what I was representing, partly. And then it was up to me to perform in the job and to do the job and deliver. And so to me, that's where the conversation comes in.
I look at this in much more simple terms. Show me an organization that is guided by one type of people, and I'll show you a group that is kind of stymied in where it's going.
Well, and just think of how many heroes there are in the military that wouldn't be there without the outreach that the military had. I agree with you. It was an important speech for the people listening to it as well. So,
and I applaud you for just saying no thanks.
One of the few people that have stood up.
Yeah. Some people, I got criticized, though. Some people felt I should have gone and defied them and done it anyways. And there's some people who really felt that way. And what I've said to them, hey, that's a perspective. That's not how I approach challenges. And I feel like having the conversation and exposing the actions was as valuable as any kind of defiant action that might have led to my arrest or something. You know,
I like the way you handled it. Going on the stage and risk getting the hook and who knows what else. Ugh.
Yeah.
My wife, Ann, who served with you in the house, said you're a very sincere and genuine person, and you certainly are, and I think that serves you well.
As was she.
Thank you for those kind words. I'll let her know. Thank you for spending your time with us. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. I can come here every week if you want. We can hang out, and, I think this is great.
Well, you know what? As always, every time Gonzo and I do a podcast, we go, wow, we learned something new today. So thank you for educating us, and thanks for the great conversation.
My pleasure.
Our thanks to WOSU and our sound engineer, Dalton Jones. If you like what you've heard, tell a friend. We don't want it to be just us. We want it to be all of us. We'll be back in another week or so with another important social justice topic. Until then, so long.